Shalom, hi everybody. It's great to be back here again on Itamar this Friday. I'm in Yeshivat Chitzim again, the place I gave a lesson last week. I enjoyed very much the ambience. I came back again. Anyway, it's great to be back. This week, it's a portion called Parshat Teitzei, which is full of so many different commandments. I had a hard time choosing. What am I going to give? What am I going to give a lesson on? There's just so much to talk about. But anyway, I'm going to focus today on one particular commandment, which sometimes is pushed aside. You know, these little commandments that are pushed aside that we have to really focus and understand them, that they're really relevant to everyone. Every human being is obligated to this commandment. And let's begin. It's mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse number 8. And let's read the verse. Ki tivneh bayit chadash, when you build a new home. Vasita ma'kel legagecha, you must make a fence on your roof top. Velo tasim damim beveitecha, you shall not bring blood into your home. Ki yipol hanofel mimenu, because someone could fall off that roof, right? And therefore we have to build a fence around that roof to make sure that no one can fall and get hurt. Right after that, the Torah goes on, Lo tizrach kalmecha kilayim, you shall not plant your vineyard, hybrids of seeds, a mixture of seeds. Pen tikdash hamelea zera shetizra'u tvot hakerem, and if it's done, if someone, God forbid, commits this sin, this prohibition, then the grapes and the wheat, again, are not allowed to be any enjoyment from them. And then it goes on to other mitzvot. Lo tachosh b'shor v'chamo yachdav. You can't plow together with a shor, a bull, and a donkey together. And you can't wear shatnez, a mixture of wool and linen, etc. The Torah goes on to different commandments. On the spot, the famous commentator, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the great giant of Torah, Rashi writes, he brings down a famous chazal, a famous midrash, mentioned also in the Talmud, and Rashi says, Im kiyamta mitzvah shiluch hakein, the mitzvah that precedes this mitzvah here of building a fence around your roof, talks about shiluch hakein, sending away the mother bird. And Rashi says right away, if you did the commandment of sending away the mother bird, sofcha levnot bayit chadash, you'll end up building a new home. V'tekayem mitzvat makeh, and then you're going to end up doing the mitzvah of building a fence around your roof. Why? Shemitzvah goreret mitzvah. Because one mitzvah leads us to the next mitzvah. V'tagia lecherem v'sadeh u'levegadim. You end up having a beautiful vineyard and beautiful clothes. L'chach nismechu parshiot. And therefore, all these parshiot, all these portions are brought together to show that one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. And then Rashi goes on to say a very, very powerful statement, also mentioned in Chazal. And he says, Ki yipol hanofel mimenu. Now, this is a little... This particular verse is a little difficult because it seems superfluous. It could have said, Ki yipol mimenu, he will fall from the roof. Why does it say, Ki yipol hanofel mimenu? He will fall, someone who's falling from it. It's a repetition. And it's also like, brings it also into the present, like someone has to fall. It's like a fact. Someone's going to fall off that roof. Rashi explains right away a very interesting concept, and I want to develop a little bit more in a minute. Rashi says, this person, the fact that Torah writes in this language means that someone is always deserving of falling off that roof. We don't know who it's going to be. Some guy who's God forbid sinned, who's obligated himself, meaning he transgressed in certain ways. We're not judges, but God's the judge. And God's saying to you, listen, someone has to fall off that roof who's going to be deserving of it. But do not be the one to have it. His roof, the one that he's going to fall off, which means don't make sure it's not your roof that this person's going to fall off. Let him fall off his own roof or someone else's roof. Don't be the one to be the vessel for his punishment. And because Rashi brings down again an important situation, when God always works it out that when a person is deserving of merit, he always ends up in many, many ways of letting a merit go through that person be a vessel of merit. So when a person's righteous and he's deserving of merit, he will be a vessel of helping people, of love and kindness. Righteousness will come through his actions. I mean, a blessing will come through his actions. But God forbid if a person is non-deserving of merit. The opposite, he's deserving of the opposite of merit, of bad things happening. He's going to be a vessel of those bad things happening through him. And God is saying, Rashi is teaching us right here, but God giving us the law in the Torah of making a fence around our roof. Do not be a vessel. I'm trying to clean yourself of God forbid someone getting hurt on your property. So do not be a vessel for that thing to happen. Just to get away from it. How do you get away from it? Build a fence around your roof. It's a very interesting concept of Rashi. And a few questions we can ask about that. Number one, if a person, God forbid, is not so, living in a life of Torah, living a life that he should live, but he does build a fence around his property. So wait a second. If a person is not really, we said, is not so righteous and he has problems, God's going to end up bringing it about through him to be the vessel of punishing someone else. How is it going to help? By building him a fence. So that's a very simple answer. Number one, the fact that a person wakes up to begin to make boundaries in his life and to make a fence on his roof, he himself is rectifying himself, and that will help him himself get out of that situation. But I want to develop that a little bit more in a minute. But first of all, before we get to that, this month again, we are working. It's just moving so fast. It's hard to hold on to time and say stop. Let us work harder and let us utilize the moment. That's just going by too fast. Life goes by too fast. This month is a month of Elul. We're preparing ourselves. We know we spoke about it last week for Rosh Hashanah, and every commandment we do, every rectification, every way we find another way to rectify ourselves is doing God's mitzvot. We see the beauty of one mitzvah leads to the other. Here a person sent out the mother bird, and then he was able to build a fence, and he built a new house, and they built a fence, and he's able to, to go on and one mitzvah brings another blessing. And the more mitzvot we do, we live a life of blessing, and this rectifies ourselves. So this is what we have to focus on now as we approach again the month, as we approach the new year, and all year round we have to focus on this. But all the more so now that the day of judgment is coming for the entire world, for every one of us, and no one is left. No one is left on the side. We're all judged, and every positive thing we do, we're adding on to our merit, and we have to work very hard for that. And here it connects so well to this time of year, and it's a very, very deep concept to understand a little bit more about this commandment. It's so important. It seems, again, most people, read the Torah, they go through it, but a lot of times you can skip over some very important points. And here is one of those mitzvot that I mentioned before. Sometimes we push aside, and we got to be so careful with it, because this is life. Anyone around their home, it's not only putting a fence around your rooftop, but any kind of obstacle that you may have in your house that can, God forbid, lead to danger. It could be a very, very dangerous dog. You must make sure if you shouldn't even really have such a dog, unless you live where I live, in a dangerous place. But it must be tied up very well and locked up on chains, and make sure that no child could get to that area. This is very important. If someone has a pool of water that's not covered over, or doesn't have a fence around it, a child can drown. All these particular laws all these particular, again, rules of putting fences around a rooftop, it's all connected to these different situations. I'm saying all these different situations are connected to the situation of putting a fence around your rooftop. We must make sure that we have no danger on our property, whether it's exposed water, whether it's a wire, electricity that's exposed, whether it's sometimes someone's cement is broken in front of his house, and a poor, an elderly person can walk by and trip on that. Any kind of obstacle that could God forbid, cause someone's injury, or God forbid, fatality, for sure, all the more so. We have to make sure that we're very careful. And this comes from the simple rule of being zahir in Hebrew, being careful. We must always be careful. And this all stems from the law of building a fence around your roof. You must be very, very careful. And make sure that, God forbid, we're not going to be a vessel to punish, anybody. God forbid, it shouldn't happen to anybody in this world. We should all return and repent. But if someone has to be punished, let us not be the vessel for that. Because that itself, again, is a punishment for us as well. And that's what the Torah is teaching us right here. But in the spiritual realm, there's a lot more than just what meets the eye over here. It's much more than that one particular concept of being a vessel to punish someone else. But again, it's much deeper. And the Aliyah Kadosh is brought down in our ancient sources, our esoteric teachings, that in the upper worlds, there are spiritual worlds we all know, that God's light, the infinite light, comes down from the 5 major worlds we all know about. Again, if someone studies the esoteric teachings, they'll learn about the different 5 worlds. But as the light comes down, God decides how much light to come down. And the light comes down through fences. We call it masachim in Hebrew. It's like a barriers. And this, in one way, limits the amount of light that can come through. It's like if you think about the sunlight, if it wasn't for being protected by the ozone and different layers of the atmosphere, Think about how dangerous the sun's rays could be if we would be completely exposed, or we get too close to that. In the physical sense, we all understand how much it's important to have boundaries. And in the spiritual sense, it's the same thing. All the more so in the spiritual sense. There's such dangers when the boundaries are broken in spirituality. And this is the lesson that the Rebbe Kadosh is teaching us. That again, we have to realize, we have to make ourselves, each world has to have the right amount of energy coming through. If it's too much, it's going to cause a huge damage as well. Too much spiritual energy when no one's ready to receive, it can be very, very dangerous as well. And now we see when we receive the tablets, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Ten Commandments, the nation of Israel wasn't able to hear. They said, "Stop! We can't handle anymore." Interesting concept. We have to realize that we have to prepare ourselves. The vessel must be prepared in a spiritual sense. We must prepare our vessel in order to receive God's light. And if we're not ready for it, we can fall. We can have tremendous spiritual drops. If we're not careful to handle that spiritual energy, it could lead us to the wrong way. We have to be very careful to develop our vessel, that we could really be a vessel of handling that spiritual energy. And this is, again, a very, very deep concept we're learning from this particular verse. Rabbi Moshe David Vali, I mentioned before, talks about it many times in other lessons. He talks about this concept a lot on his explanation about the spiritual understanding of this commandment itself. But again, I want to develop a little bit more of understanding this, and this I think connects very, very well. We know there are so many people in this world that, I'm telling you, I just recently read some kind of statistic, there are so many people in depression. And the question is, what does this depression come for? There are all these kind of drugs, there's antidepressants, so many people you hear about left and right. But the answer is, where does this come from? Why do people get depressed for? And the answer is, a person, we spoke about this tons of times. The physical and the spiritual meet. God has brought together, the most opposites. He's brought together in this world, our physical body and our spiritual soul. And these two forces meet together in a body. And it's a very, very difficult thing when our soul is being led on the wrong path, because the body naturally will bring the soul to the physical ways. But if a person is not allowing his spiritual entity to be nourished and to be fed on true spirituality, he's going to be brought down and depressed. And a lot of depression comes from the fact when a person feels he doesn't have meaning in his life, he doesn't have direction in his life, he's looking for the right path. People are jumping from one thing to the next, trying this, leaving this place, going to that place, running around. It's a constant search. And a lot of people, especially the young years of life, they'll spend most of their time having fun and materialism. And when people live on this, they'll never be satisfied, of course. And they're running from one kind of thing to the next attraction. But eventually, it's just going to run out. Life eventually runs out. And when a person wants in this world to reach true satisfaction and feel true, how do we say, satisfaction in this world, a person has to find the true spiritual pathway in this world. And when he's not in that direction, he's going to fall. He's going to fall off that roof. He's going to fall off that. He may think, right now I'm climbing up, I'm having the greatest time of my life. Here I am, great, everything's working great. All of a sudden he's going to collapse eventually. And that's because he really did not define, he didn't make any spiritual boundaries in his life. He's living a life without boundary, without proper direction. And the whole concept of a fence is to guide you in a spiritual path, to give you a direction, allowing God's light to lead you and to enter your system and to rectify you. But again, when you think, you know it all, and you don't need any direction, eventually it catches up to you. And that's where the terrible depression that's going on in the world, and terrible things that go on in the world, is because, again, a person did not really make himself a vessel, make himself a vessel for Hashem, for God, to let the light of God shine upon him. And that's the kensen. When you build a new home, you can look at that, not only building a physical home, but you're building a spiritual home. Okay, we're building our spiritual home. That's a whole life's goal as well. We must make a fence to our roof. Our roof is our highest part of the body, right? Our soul, our spiritual entity needs to be directed. V'lo tasim damim beitecha. So you should not, God forbid, bring dinim, which are referred to husks, evil forces, into your home, because you will fall spiritually. And that's another very spiritual way of looking at this concept. But of course, we should not forget the most important thing. We have to first live in this world, and that's make sure that our house is well protected. God forbid we shouldn't have any windows in our home that could be obstacles for children to fall out those windows. And if the children go on a chair, you got to make a very high, again, have your windows barred the proper way so a child can't fall out, or any kind of thing that can be an obstacle. We must, of course, understand that concept, a very simple concept, and of course take it a step further for our spiritual side to us. We must make sure that we have spiritual direction, spiritual boundaries, and not, again, live a life of complete, as we say in Hebrew, hefkerut. A person does what he wants, no direction, and that leads, again, could lead to the worst situations in life of depression and living a life without true meaning. And everyone needs meaning in their lives. But anyway, I hope the message got across. I want you to have a wonderful Shabbat, and let us work hard as we approach Rosh Hashanah to grow spiritually and to climb the ladder, make ourselves the proper boundaries in order to be the vessels of Hashem, to absorb the spiritual light that can rectify us all. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Miss you all. Catch you next week. Bye-bye.